Welcome to Creative Connections, connecting the creative, creatively connecting everything else. We've been thinking about what we'd actually like to grow in our garden here in West Sussex and what might suit the conditions we have.
And I've realised that choosing what to grow is rather more complicated than simply making a list of plants and vegetables we like.
Because the garden has a few demands of its own.
It does. We're on the South Downs, so much of our soil is thin, alkaline and chalky, and it drains very freely. Some parts of the garden can become very dry during a long spell without rain, while other areas hold rather more moisture during winter and early spring.
So whatever we grow has to be reasonably happy with that.
Yes, but with vegetables I've got a few other requirements as well.
Of course you have.
I actually want to enjoy eating them. I don't want to grow something just because it happens to be wonderfully suited to the soil.
That seems reasonable.
And I'd like things that are fairly straightforward. I enjoy looking after the garden, but I'd like what we grow to fit around the time I actually have available. So I don't want plants that need constant watering, feeding, weeding, or attention.
And pests?
As few as possible, or at least pests that can be dealt with fairly simply, rather than becoming an ongoing battle.
So we're looking for the lazy gardener's vegetable garden, or low maintenance, if you prefer.
Well, both are accurate, really.
So we've got quite a list of requirements now.
We have. Will we actually eat it? Is it reasonably easy to grow? Will it cope with a dry period without needing water every day? Are any pest problems fairly manageable? And will it be happy in the sort of soil we have?
And presumably not everything has to survive the entire year.
That was another thing I realised. Initially, I was thinking we somehow needed vegetables that could cope with everything from a dry summer to a damp winter, but quite a few crops will have been harvested long before the wettest part of winter arrives.
Which makes life rather easier.
It does.
So what are you thinking of trying first?
Beetroot is definitely one possibility. I like eating it. It seems fairly straightforward to grow, and once it's established, it can cope reasonably well with a spell of dry weather.
Although presumably that doesn't mean never watering it.
No, if we have a genuinely prolonged dry spell, I'd still water it. I'm not trying to find vegetables that can live without water altogether, just things that don't immediately give up if the weather stays dry for a while.
And apparently beetroot gives us something else to eat as well.
Yes, the young leaves are edible and can be eaten raw in salads.
Can you pick them without stopping the beetroot growing?
You can take a few leaves from each plant as it grows, provided you don't strip all the foliage away. And when the seedlings are thinned, those little leaves can go into a salad as well, rather than being thrown away.
So salad leaves first and beetroot later.
Exactly. And the beetroot itself I'd probably roast most often because I love the sweetness you get from roasting it. But you can also boil beetroot, pickle beetroot, grate it raw in salads.
So it certainly passes the eating test.
Definitely.
We looked at chard as well.
We did. And on paper it sounded quite promising because it's robust and crops for a long time.
But...
Then I found out what you actually do with it.
Which is...
The mature leaves are generally cooked rather like spinach, wilted, steamed or sautéed.
And that doesn't appeal?
Not really. So however easy it might be to grow, there's no point giving it space in the vegetable garden if I don't actually want to eat it.
So chard is out. What do you think about carrots?
I love carrots, so I'd really like to grow them.
But they come with one complication. Carrot fly.
Yes, the larvae can tunnel into the roots and spoil the carrots.
Which doesn't sound terribly low maintenance.
Except the protection can be quite simple. Fine insect-proof mesh over the crop should keep the flies out.
So you put the protection in place and largely leave it there?
That's what appeals to me. I'm perfectly happy doing a job once at the beginning, if it means I don't then spend months fighting a pest.
And carrots cope reasonably well when it gets dry.
Once they're established, yes. They have that root reaching down into the soil, so they're not as dependent on moisture right at the surface as some crops. I'd water them during a prolonged dry spell, but hopefully not every day.
And there's no difficulty deciding what to do with them afterwards.
Definitely not. Raw, roasted, steamed, soups, stews, we'd eat them.
And what about parsnips?
Another one I really like.
So they've already passed the first test.
Yes, and once they're established, they seem to be quite undemanding.
Are they difficult to grow then?
The slightly awkward thing with parsnips seems to be getting them started. The seed can be slow and a bit unreliable, so fresh seed and not sowing too early should help.
And after that,
They're fairly tough and can cope with dry spells reasonably well.
any pests?
Carrot fly can attack parsnips as well.
But presumably the same mesh works.
Exactly, so perhaps carrots and parsnips could have the same sort of protection,
One solution for two vegetables.
which I like.
And parsnips can stay in the ground quite late, can't they?
Yes, they're extremely hardy, and frost actually makes them sweeter, so we don't necessarily have to harvest them all at once.
And how will they mostly be eaten?
Roasted, definitely roasted.
Perhaps ordinary root vegetables are the answer. They seem to cope fairly well with dry spells.
Hopefully. And I started off thinking we might need to find some collection of unusual drought-resistant vegetables, and we may end up growing beetroot, carrots and parsnips.
Possibly the least exotic vegetable patch in Sussex.
But one will actually eat.
There are presumably some vegetables that don't fit quite so well.
Yes, not because there's anything wrong with them, but because they might ask more of us than I really want.
Courgettes?
I like courgettes, but they can be thirsty. I might still grow one or two, but I wouldn't want the whole vegetable garden filled with things that need that much watering.
Runner beans?
Similar problem. They can be very productive, but they need more looking after, supports, tying in, watering.
And what about globe artichokes, which don't mind long spells of dry weather?
Yes, I've ruled them out too because I don't like eating them.
Which seems a rather decisive objection.
I think so. However beautiful the plant is, I'm not giving it valuable vegetable growing space if I don't want to eat what's growing on it.
What about fruit?
Fruit is a bit different because once the trees and bushes are established, they can become a permanent part of the garden.
And we've already got a good example with our apple tree.
We have. It's a well-established tree, and it's been remarkably happy through a long spell of dry weather. We haven't had to keep watering it, and that's exactly the sort of thing I'm looking for.
Presumably its roots are doing most of the work for us.
Yes, a mature tree has a much bigger and deeper root system than an annual vegetable, so it can find moisture further down in the soil.
And apples certainly pass the eating test.
Definitely. Eating them straight from the tree, cooking with them, apple crumble, yum.
What about soft fruit?
Well, we've already got gooseberries and blackcurrants in the garden, so they're part of the picture already.
And they're exactly the sort of fruit we'd want to keep growing.
Definitely. They come back year after year and they don't seem to demand an enormous amount of attention from us.
And we actually eat them.
Which, as we've established, is quite an important part of the selection process.
Although sometimes we get rather more than we can eat at once.
We do. When there's an abundance of fruit in summer, we pick it and freeze it in batches. Then we can use it through autumn and winter rather than feeling we have to eat everything the moment it's ripe.
So the garden is still feeding us months later.
Exactly. And there's something particularly welcoming about making a gooseberry crumble in autumn or winter from fruit we picked in the garden during the summer.
And we've got raspberries as well.
We have, and they're probably one of my favourite things to pick straight from the garden. And if we have too many ripening at once, which often happens, I freeze some in batches too, so we can use them later.
And how much looking after do they need?
Not a huge amount, although I've let ours spread rather more than I should, so that's something I need to get back under control.
How?
They send up suckers, new shoots that appear away from where you originally planted them. So I need to remove the ones that are coming up where I don't want them and keep them a bit more contained.
And they need supporting as well.
Yes, but that's the sort of job I don't mind. I can sort out the supports and tie the canes in properly in spring, keep the weeds down, remove unwanted suckers, and then there isn't an enormous amount to do until the fruit starts appearing in June.
So not maintenance free.
No, but manageable. There are a few jobs at particular times rather than something demanding attention every day.
And if May and June happens to be very dry?
I may still need to give them some water while the fruit is developing. Their roots are fairly shallow, so they're not completely drought-proof.
But the reward is raspberries straight from the garden.
Which makes the little bit of work very worthwhile.
What about herbs?
Things like rosemary, thyme, sage and oregano should be quite happy in the drier parts of the garden.
But perhaps less happy where the soil stays damper.
Exactly. So rather than deciding they're unsuitable, I think it's simply a matter of putting them in the right place.
A raised bed?
Possibly, or large pots, or just one of the naturally drier, sunnier parts of the garden, or maybe by a wall.
So we don't need every plant to tolerate exactly the same conditions.
No, that's probably one of the most useful things I've realised.
We've talked quite a lot about things we can eat, but presumably the same thinking applies to the rest of the garden.
It does. I still want some flowers and flowering shrubs, but I'd like plants that suit the particular place we put them and don't need constant attention.
We've already got hydrangeas.
We have, and I love them when they're doing well, but during a long dry spell they really begin to struggle, and that's when I find myself having to water them much more often.
So you're not getting rid of them?
No, definitely not, but if I'm adding more flowering plants, I'd like some that are naturally a little happier in the drier areas.
What about potentilla?
We already have a potentilla, and it's actually been a very good example of the sort of plant I'm looking for.
Why?
Because I did virtually nothing to it for years. Eventually it became a bit of a bird's nest, lots of tangled woody growth, so I cut it back quite hard.
And it survived?
More than survived. It came back really well. So it seems to be one of those plants that will tolerate a fair amount of neglect and then recover perfectly well when you finally give it some attention.
Which sounds rather well suited to what we're looking for.
Exactly. I don't mind pruning something occasionally. That's very different from having to look after it every few days.
And we've got sedum as well.
Yes, and ours seems very happy. It copes extremely well when the garden gets dry and really doesn't seem to ask very much of us.
Those thick leaves presumably help.
They do. They store water, which is why sedums cope so well with dry conditions. And ours flowers beautifully later in the year as well.
So that's another plant that's already proved itself.
Definitely. I'd just keep it in one of the parts of the garden where it's already clearly happy, rather than moving it somewhere that holds more moisture in winter.
What about hollyhocks? We used to have lots of those.
We did, and they came back year after year, so they're another plant that's already shown it can cope with our garden.
Would you grow them again?
Yes, I'd really like to bring them back, but I think I'd put them somewhere different this time.
Where?
At the gap at the bottom of the garden where it opens onto the field. It's very sunny there, with a few posts and barbed wire running across the boundary.
So they'd get plenty of light.
Exactly, and because hollyhocks grow quite tall, I think they'd soften that rather bare boundary and add a lot of colour without taking up a huge amount of space.
And the posts might even be useful if they need supporting.
That's what I was thinking.
And if they self-seed, perhaps they'll establish themselves there again.
That's what I'm hoping. I quite like the idea of them becoming a feature at the bottom of the garden.
Anything else you're considering?
Buddleia is one possibility. There are smaller varieties now, so it doesn't necessarily have to turn into an enormous shrub.
And of course the flowers are good for butterflies.
Yes, which is another attraction. Caryopteris is another one I'm looking at because it has blue flowers later in the summer.
So some of the drier parts of the garden might actually give us opportunities rather than simply problems.
I think so. It's really about finding plants that are naturally comfortable in the particular spot rather than constantly trying to alter the conditions for them.
Some of this presumably isn't just about choosing the plants.
No, how we look after the soil matters too. Mulching should help reduce evaporation, so hopefully more of the water that falls actually stays available to the plants.
And we already collect some rainwater.
We do. We have water butts collecting rain from the roofs, which means that when we do need to water during a dry spell, we've hopefully got a supply of rainwater we can use.
So in a way, we're making use of the wetter periods to help us through the drier ones.
Exactly. It seems rather wasteful to let all that rainwater disappear when we know there may be a point later in the year when the garden needs it.
Which sounds rather more sensible than trying to find some miraculous plant that never needs water.
Exactly. I don't think that plan exists.
So what are we thinking of growing? If we had to make a shortlist now, what would be on it?
Beetroot, definitely. Carrots, because I love them and the pest problem seems manageable. Parsnips as well.
And the things we already know work?
Definitely. The apple tree, gooseberries, blackcurrants, raspberries, potentilla and sedum have all already shown us something about what does well here.
And the hollyhocks are coming back.
I hope so.
So we're not trying to create a garden that needs no looking after at all.
No, I enjoy looking after the garden, but I'd like what we grow to fit around the time I actually have available.
And we're certainly not suggesting that these are the things everyone else should grow.
Absolutely not. This is simply what we're considering for our garden, the conditions we have, the things we like to eat, and the amount of time we realistically want to spend looking after them.
And presumably the only way we'll really know what works is to try it.
Exactly. Some things will probably do brilliantly and others may not. But at least we're starting with things that seem reasonably well suited to the garden and, in the case of the vegetables and fruit, things we'll actually enjoy eating.
And if you found something that's particularly easy to grow and you genuinely enjoy having in your garden, we'd be interested to hear about it.
Especially if it more or less looks after itself, and I can eat it.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode of Creative Connections, come back next time and we'll draw a new map of connections.
Wherever you're watching or listening to this podcast, please like, subscribe or follow because it helps us keep the channel going and build even more creative connections.